Okay, this is the fifth class on the akeida. There are three different ways of translating the story. One is in the simplistic manner of Abraham and Isaac and the way it's translated in all the books. And the other is a way that we will discuss when we finish this way, which is that the whole story with all the words reflect it's talking about the soul, not the body. It's the soul journey in the body and everything that happens with it. That's for later. And the way we're doing it is where Abraham has a body, but he's going on a spiritual journey and balancing and transforming something within himself. It's an inner journey. And that's something that everyone goes through. So when we look at it as a journey of Abraham doing his own thing, it's a very nice story, but there are a lot of questions, a lot of issues, a lot of things that that are difficult to understand. But when we understand as an internal journey, it answers actually all the words, and so that's why we're going through all the words, and so we're in the middle of it. We're in the middle of where it says he got up and he went to the place, and what we spoke about last week is it says in a singular form. It doesn't say they went, it says he went. It's talking about Abraham. He went to the place, and it's an internal place. Asher Amar Loi Halikim, that Elohim, the God, said to him. Now the word Asher is translated as which or that. Now actually, if you wanted to say he went to the place, you would just say he went to the place. Why does it have to say the place that Elohim said to him? It's like a lot of extra words here. He was not told the place in a physical sense. And it's a spiritual journey, and in a spiritual journey you only know the place when you get there. There are certain things they're inner things, you can't tell a person how to open up there, how to get there. You're either there or you don't there. You feel it or you don't feel it. You sense it or you don't sense it. You perceive it or you don't. You can't. Each person has to go on a journey to open up those parts within themselves. And that's what this is. Asher Amar Le'elikim. It's a journey of, it's not a physical place. It's an internal, that's why it has these extra words here. Amalai, Amar is said, but it can be communicated or put into his consciousness. Lo, to him. It could be it was pointed out to him, meaning that he will feel and know the place as soon as he's supposed to. So many times in life we have that issue. We want to know things, but for some reason we don't know it until we have to know it. So to Abraham, it was his journey for now. It was a personal journey. Holikim, God, we translate and have explained that it means the power of boundaries. Each thing that a person does has a certain definition, a boundary, a limitation, a place you can express and you can't. And that's what Holikim means. It doesn't actually mean God. He was given the knowledge of the boundaries for his journey so it would be safe and successful. It may mean that he now understood exactly the place of where the communication came from also. Sometimes we get information and we don't know where it comes from. Is it really? Isn't it really? Where does it come from? Maybe now he was going on this journey, he realized where, he now was certain where the communication came from. Bayom Hashlishi, on the third day. Now, it could be there's a comma here, it could be not. Let's see what the third day means. It's very strange if he's living in Israel, and he has to go a short distance, and it's the third day. It's a very strange to take you to walk that long. So what does Bayom Hashlishi mean? What does the letter base mean? Base, the second letter of the alphabet, can mean with, on, in. The letter itself has meanings. So it could be with Yom, or on Yom, or in Yom. And we've explained elsewhere in the translation of Genesis what the word Yom means. That Yom is an expression of the Creator within a defined space. And the word actually has three letters: a yud, which is a small letter, a vav, which is that small letter with a line drawn down, and a mem, a square mem, like a block. And the idea is that small dot, which is the crater, is drawn down into a defined space. And that's how we explain Yom, and that's how it makes a lot more sense in Genesis also, rather than 6 days, but 6 levels of expression of the Creator in creation. So Yom, besides meaning day, has this meaning of expression. And depending on your day, will depend what comes into that day. Each day has its own journey. So it doesn't say Vayihi Bayom Hashlishi, and it was on the third day, because Vayihi would mean something else transpired on the third day. So the fact that it doesn't say Bayom is also means it's a continuation of what he was doing before. He was analyzing the situation, so he came to the perception and the definition of what Shlishi is, 3. What is 3? Now, it doesn't say 3, it says the 3, Hashlishi. The is Ha, and Shlishi means 3, but also means strong or balanced. It's used in various different ways throughout the Tanakh. The third denotes something specific. In Genesis 1:13, it says Yom Shlishi. It doesn't say Yom HaShlishi, the third day. It says Yom Shlishi, without the letter Hey. And many understand that this is the third day of his traveling. But, on another sense, it was the third day after Abraham began to contemplate all the aspects of his journey. Thus, he didn't really journey anywhere special except in his own mind. And we know a lot of people journey in their mind. It's very common. It's probably more common that people travel places in their mind than anywhere else, than with anything else.
Daydream a lot.
Yeah. Shlishi also means strong, or something stronger, harmony. It says in Psalms 80, verse 6, Demois Sholish, which means profuse tears. Yeah. When the tears, they're just flowing. So it's strong tears. It's a constant flow, a big flow of tears. So you can say it's strong, but it's not just strong. It's a flow, a strong flow, I guess. In Exodus chapter 14, verse 7, it says Vishalishim, without the letter Yud actually, and it means officers or strong ones. There it's talking about when Pharaoh, they chased the Jewish people to the sea. So it says he took the horses of a Shalishim, and the Shalishim. So Shalishim would be the special horse riders, strong people. Now, Shlish is also interesting. You have a king. The second to a king is called Mishnah Lamelech, the second to the king, and the third to the king is called Shlish Lamelech, the third to the king. It's also used in that sense as well, as an officer or someone of importance. In Kabbalah, the word Shlish is Tiferes, beauty, because it's a combination of Chesed and Gvura, kindness and severity. And because of the combination of two different emotions, and they balances them, it's called Shlish, Tiferes. The Rogatchover writes that all aspects of Torah are 3, and you find 3 all throughout Torah in many places. Even the ultimate completion of the future has to do with 3, and reflects the element of peace. When there's harmony, it's peace. There's peace. Now it's interesting to note that all the letters of the Hebrew language are in this story of Abraham and Isaac, except for the letter Gimel. It doesn't. All the letters except for one letter, which is Gimel, the third letter. The letter is numerically 3, but by saying by Yom HaShlishi, it alludes to the idea of the third letter, 3. It still has the numerical aspect of it anyway. The place that Shlishi is mentioned here in the verse is when he continues on his journey, after he's contemplating and he has clarity, then it says Shlishi. Which is why it makes more sense that it doesn't mean a third day, but it means when the realization of the balance of his journey.
Stage, a third level.
Yeah. We also find the word Hineni mentioned here third time. I'm ready 3 times, and that's something which we'll discuss later on, what the relevance of that is. And the word Maka in place is 3 times. There are a few things that are 3 here. And we'll discuss them at different points. In Hosea, chapter 6, verse 2, it says, He will heal us after 2 days, and the third day, B'yom HaShlishi, Kimenu, He'll raise us up, and we'll live before Him. Kimenu v'yichnichya. The Vilna Gaon writes that although this was all done in this world, everything is done in what we call 2 days, the main revelation of the work that Abraham did on the third day will be revealed in the future. It's a verse that's brought down in many places and discussed, dealing with the future, with the 2 temples and the third, or the idea of third refers to the future. The number 3 has a special natural and creator energy force. It's interesting to note that 3, Shalosh, has also 3 letters in it. A Lamed, which is numerically 30, and 2 shins, 1 on each side, which the shins are each 300. So it's a multiple. There's 3, 30, and 300. So 3 letters, letter 30, and 2 300s. The shins individually have 3 heads and crowns, adding another dimension to the letter. When you have crowns on top of the letters, it creates a more spiritual element. That's not what we're going into, but I'm just mentioning it. In this verse, the 2 yuds are added, shlishi, so shalosh is 3 letters. Shlishi is 5 letters, making it numerically 650, which is also the word toren, which means a mast or a flagpole, a special point in creation, which, as we discussed at the beginning, the word nes, it doesn't mean test, but it means something that is raised. So that's also connected here. At the beginning, the raising came from above, and the raising of Elikim, whatever happened, and here Avraham achieved that raising himself. Number 3 is the only number that is the sum of and balance of the previous 2 consecutive numbers, 1 and 2. You take 1 and 2, you have 3, but you don't have that with any other numbers. Shlishi is 650, and so is the words above the rakia, l'malam in harakia, and lo tohor bra, that the world wasn't created for nothing. Also, Yoshuv el Hashem v'rachamehu, return to Hashem and He will have mercy. So these are all numerical values that people create relationships to. I don't know if they bring it down anywhere, but there are. People like to play with these things. Vayisa, and he raised or he lifted his eyes. Abraham lifted his eyes and he saw the place from the distance. So, Vayisa, he raised or lifted. Raising your eyes, Vayisa is not just it raised, but it's looking with an intention. Now that he decided that the journey was for Isaac, he was able to perceive the spiritual place he was headed. Avraham refers to the soul. Now, S is a word, of his eyes. S is a word which is not translated, and we've explained in other places S in different ways. Like in Bereshis, we translate it with. We also explained that it's A to Z, Aleph to Tov. It incorporates everything. But there's a very interesting, another explanation on the word S. Reb Solomon ibn Ochana, he lived just after at the time of the Arizal. He lived in Israel, in Tzfas. So he knew Reb Chaim Vital, and he wrote down a few notes of, not elaborate, but a few notes of things he heard from the Arizal and from Reb Chaim Vital. And he writes the following thing. It says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim. The first verse of Torah has twice the word es, but it's not translated. Although when we translate it, the ways to translate it, it's not translated in any common translation. And he says this word es is like the klippa, the shell that surrounds the fruit. And it says in Vayikra, in Leviticus 19, es, it says the word es, and it explains, the Talmud explains in Brachas, that means es hatafel lepirei. The es is tafel, is secondary to the fruit. And that's why the world, when it initially was created, it didn't stay that way. It couldn't exist that way because the rigidity, the boundaries were so forceful that nothing could exist. And that's why you have later on, in chapter 2, it says, B'yom ha'aseh Hashem Elokim, the day that Hashem Elokim made earth and heaven. And it doesn't say the word es there. And so he explains that while es can incorporate things, es can also refer to something that protects something. And so many times in this story we have the word es here all the time. And normally we explain it as something that is incorporating something more than just the word. Es hatafel, it's adding more to it. But it could also be that it's a protective energy for what is happening as well. Anyway, the Alshich in Bereshis writes that the es refers to something spiritual. Ein of his eyes, Abraham was carried by his vision, his perception, his spiritual eyes. V'yisas Einov, maybe he raised his awareness of perception. Vayar, he saw es hamakim, the place. He saw the spiritual place. The Midrashim and the Gemara, it says he saw a flame of fire, or he saw a presence there, Shekhinah, a cloud, however it's written. But when you read that, what does it mean he saw something? There's a story which I heard from Reb Hillel of Paritch. Reb Hillel lived, he was a little boy, so he was probably, this is close to 200 years ago, and he was a rabbi in Paritch, but as a boy he grew up in the town of Bragin in Ukraine. That's where my family lived. That's probably how I know the story, because it happened in that town. His father took him to see as Reb Nachman Matl of Chernobyl, the Chernobyl Rebbe. Chernobyl is about 100 kilometers from the town, and he was a spiritual leader in Ukraine, and he came to visit the town, and his father took the boy, carried the boy to see this rabbi, and he said to his father, why is his head on fire? He saw fire on his head. And so this is something that there are people who see energy, see auras. I mean, you have Kirlian photography, but there are people who see it visually. Most people see only the physical. Other people see the energy around it. It's still physical, but it's metaphysical for some people. It just depends how you're open. And so when it says he saw the place, since we're going on an internal journey, the seeing is also recognition internally. He saw where he is. He felt and saw where he is. It says meirachik. He saw it from the distance. Now, the word, by the way, makom, place, is actually 3 times in this story. So, because it's 3 times, it's also explained that it refers to the 3 temples, the first, second, and third temple. The first 2, makom is the first, second, and later on in the blessing, later on towards the end of the story, the third one is talking about the future, the third temple. So that's one way that people like to explain it. But that which was distant, he saw what was earlier distant, now it was closer, he could see it now. As a person ascends spiritual realms, the relationship to time changes. That which takes, let's say, 15 years in a physical realm, when you go to Yetzirah, to a higher spiritual realm, it takes one moment. Just in a second you can see everything that happens here in 15 years. When you go to a high world, it says in Tehillim, El Shon Beinechach Mesmel, then 1,000 years of what we do physical you can see in one moment. So the idea of spiritual sight is not that you can tell the future, but that you're on a different level where time is less relevant, and so you can see things. You don't see the future. You see everything in the present, but you see a much wider expanse in the present. This is something a lot of people don't understand about the future. It's not about telling the future. It's about seeing it because you're in a different place. It's Shlomo Melech says, Chacham, that a wise person, Einav Bereisha, his head, his eyes are in his head. He's able to perceive what will be in the future. He sees how things are and will see the outcome, what the end result will be. That's a wise person. But that's still not a high spiritual level. High spiritual level is you just know, you see it. Anyway, he saw the place from the distance since he could not see it from close. There are things that we look at in ourselves, we don't see it. There's a blockage, so we don't see it from close. But sometimes we know we have something, a potential in us, it's just distant. And when it opens up, we can see it's still distant, but we know we can get to it because we have that ability. It says in Jeremiah, chapter 31, from the distance, Yud Kei Vav Kei appeared to me. The Divrei Shalom of Kodenov, he writes, he saw from the distance and believed. Vayaras HaMokim, and he saw the place has the last letters is emes, truth. He thought that he was far from the truth. For through truth, one should be able to see Hashem, and he thought he was far. That's what he saw. Medrash Tanchuma, a lot of people judge themselves, and the judging themselves is actually what keeps them away from themselves. So the judgments that people do, they have to be very careful because that interferes with your connection to yourself and the Creator. And there are a lot of ways of life that want people to judge things in a negative way and in a strong way, and all that does, it keeps people imprisoned in their own minds and their own hearts. Medrash Tanchuma writes that this place was very deep. Normally when people read it, they mean deep, they think it's a valley. And they say, well, if it's a valley, how did it become a mountain? Something happened. But it's not about a mountain, it's talking about deep within him. He became aware of a deep place within himself. In Jeremiah 31 it says, from the distance, Yud Kei Vav Kei appeared to me, and an everlasting love. I loved you, and therefore I extended kindness to you. Which also refers to Abraham. Any questions? Vayema Avraham el Narav, and Avraham said to his lads. Well, if you are talking where it's talking about there were two boys there, whatever, and he's talking to them, that's the simple translation. Here, we have a different way of looking at it, and that is Abraham communicated with the strength of his youth. And he needed that strength and that energy. He was an old man at this point. He needed the energy of a young man to go on this journey. Going on an inner journey is not easy. A lot of people, when you get older, you can't remember what you thought the minute before. You get tired more easy. It's not easy. So he had to connect with the energy of his being young. And also the comprehension of things he learned as a young man, the way he was able to think. He explained what was needed. That gave him the knowledge. But if you're talking about the lads, he explained to the boys and his son that this is a spiritual journey. And when you go on a journey, it's a journey which you leave the body. It's very possible, we'll see soon, that he didn't know if it was a journey that he was leaving the body or how it was going to be. So, if it's a journey where he leaves the body, when you do astral travel, when you go out of the body and you go somewhere, you have to have a way to come back. If you don't have a way to come back, you don't come back. So you have to be very careful in traveling, in leaving your body. So he explained to the boys that he's going on a journey and he needs someone to hold the physical place for him. That's one way of looking at this. Another way is that this refers, Na'ara of his boys, doesn't refer to boys, it refers to the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. When you're young, you have an evil inclination, a negative inclination, and a positive inclination. And that's what it refers to these two things. When you're older, you realize it doesn't matter anymore. But when you're younger, things do matter, and there's a fight within yourself. So that's what the Na'ara of his young years refers to. Shvu, sit or wait. Lachem, for yourselves. Stay for yourselves. Shvu means sit, but we find sometimes it doesn't literally mean sit. In Exodus 24 or Numbers 22, there shvu means wait. Shamshon Raphael Hirsch explains that this is where his spiritual journey separates Abraham and Isaac from the other descendants of Noah and the Bnei Noach. This journey, till now, everyone was basically the same. They had the same creator, the same rules that they had to live. This journey was taking Abraham to a spirit and Isaac to a spiritual place that was going to give them a different responsibility spiritually. So till now, everyone was considered Bnei Noach. Noahites, people that had to be responsible in a universal manner. Here, they were going to a place where it was a personal responsibility. It was a different journey. And this is where it separates. The Hebrew letters, the Talmud says the Hebrew letters of the word Shvu Lachem are an acronym for Baruch Shem Kavod Machosei L'Olam Va'ed. The common translation is Blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. According to Chassidus and Kabbalah, the verse can be explained to mean array of array, from the level of Malchus, kingship, is drawn into time and space. Okay, so Lachem seems actually, it should say just sit here. Why the word Lachem? It seems superfluous. Now, seeing often refers more to spiritual, where Lachem refers more to physical. And we find that in the Talmud Pesachim, where it says about keeping the Yom Tov, the festivals, it says, the Torah also uses the word Lachem, and it means half for you and half for the Creator. That you have to enjoy yourself. It's not a festival, it's only to the Creator. You have to spend time enjoying yourself and spend time with the Creator, a bit of both. Half and half. So Lachem refers there to the physical. Po, here. The word can also be read as peh, which refers to an opening. Meaning you're staying here to keep an opening up for us to return from our journey. Im hachamor. I'm actually going through a lot of words today, so we can actually eventually finish the class, because I think it's fine. We'll come back to some of the things another week, or some other things they'll be developed as we do later on. Pai im hachamor. Sit here with the donkey. The verse reads well without the words yourselves are here, or even with the donkey, just stay here, wait for us here. But it's used to show that Abraham was envisioning a spiritual journey without a sacrifice. There was no physical sacrifice, it's just a spiritual thing. You stay here with the physical, we're going on a spiritual journey. There was no idea of a physical sacrifice from these words. Hachamor, if you take the word chamor, donkey, and you rearrange the letters, it means chomer, which is the physical reality, the physical. So, if he's talking to the boys, it's talking about how he's telling them to stay here, and he's going on a spiritual journey. If it's talking about himself, he's also realizing he's explaining the differences that could happen on the journey. It's explaining the possibilities of what could be. So he's preparing himself for whatever eventuality will happen. Vani vanar, I and the lad. It doesn't say myself and my son, implying some other intention. It says there were two lads. If he's saying my son, I'm going with my son. Why with the lad? You don't say that normally to other children. So it implies something else. It refers Vani vanar, I and the energy that I have and the comprehension I have and the balance I have that I learned from my youth. That's what I'm going with. Neilcha, we will go. The Onkelos Aramaic says, it doesn't write go, but he says reach. We will reach ad koi, until ko. Until ko could mean so, thus, until we're able to, until a place of receiving from the Creator. It's like ko is like till here. It's a short distance. We'll go into the place of ko yizaracha. So will be your seeds, your children. The word kai is used. The place will know about my future generations. It's interesting, and later on we'll bring it out also, that Isaac couldn't have children, and because of this he was able to have children. This whole story changed his energy to be able to have children. But anyway, kai is the same word used for the energy that the priests best bless with. Kai Savarach Hazbnei Yisrael. Many prophets use this in their prophecy. They say Kai, so God spoke. They use the word Kai, whereas Moshe uses the word this, because it was direct. The word for priest is Kohen, which is made up the word of Ko and Hen, meaning the acceptance of Ko. Hen means yes, accepting it. Possibly this means acceptance of whatever the Creator gives you to fulfill in this world. But I don't translate the word ko here. I leave it in the original language because I don't have an exact description of it. It just is what it is. The numerical value of the word ko is 25. That's the same amount of letters in the word in this verse. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God, hear Israel, Hashem, our God, Hashem is one. The 25 letters. In the Kutlev Yitzchak on the Zohar, it says it can also refer to the distance of 25 parsa. The Talmud says that in a day, a person walks 10 parsa, and so that would be 2 days. And the third day, he said, we're going to go till here, which means until 25, another 5 parsa, which then would mean that the story happened around midday. That's an interesting way to look at it. It doesn't say here what time it happened, morning, midday, or afternoon, but that's one way of looking at that. There's discussion in that too. V'nishtachave, and we will prostrate ourselves, all aspect of ourselves. V'noshuva, and we will return. I will return together with Isaac. This is again a very clear delineation that he's coming back. There's not going to be any sacrifice. He says we're coming back. The word shuv means return. Yet the returning can be also to our essential connection with the Creator. That's why Isaac said, where is the Sefer elevation? And Abraham answered, we can only achieve the Sefer elevation, which will explain what that is, with the help of the Creator. The term V'noshuva is a powerful way of life for future generations, and in the future everyone will return. So, in the word V'nishtachava, we will bow, which is prostrate, which is basically laying ourselves out. It has the word letter Vav. The Vav seems superfluous. It should say Ne'echad Kai Nishtachava V'noshuva, we will bow and we will return. It adds the letter Vav. So some commentaries say that the extra letter Vav means it's as if it says, or we will prostrate ourselves. In other words, Abraham is saying we're going to go till here, and either that's where we're going to go and we're not going to come back, or we will come back. So he's not sure what exactly is going to happen. He just knows that he's going. And this is very interesting because there's no, as we said, the word for here is Ola, an elevation. He was elevating himself and Isaac. There is no sacrifice, and there was no intention of sacrifice. When you look at the words, there's no intention of sacrifice either, and yet everyone seems to translate it that way. And we'll get to the other words later, alter and what happens, and you'll see that it has nothing to do with sacrificing. Any questions? All right. Mashtachva, yes.
I just was thinking about where it says Akko, and if you're talking about a spiritual journey, so in keeping with the way other things become translated from this point on, why can't that also refer to connecting with the kochot or the energy of Hashem? You know, so
It does. It can.
So that's what that it's like Hashem Masarashi Kavas, like a. Because if he's saying Akko, that's really what they're trying to achieve, right? So
when he says until here, ko, what does that mean?
Right.
So it's
to connect with that energy.
Mm-hmm. So if this is an internal journey, then he knows where he's going within himself, and he knows that he's going to take himself and Isaac on this journey, but he doesn't know if he's actually going to be able to come back. It's not a journey, a physical journey where he's going to a place. It's an internal journey. Like we have the story of Abraham and Issac. There were 4 people who went into spiritual journey, and it says one died, one went crazy, one became an apostate, and only Rebbe Akiva came out balanced. You can't just go on a spiritual journey. These journeys are internal, in your mind, in your heart, and if you're not ready for it, you go crazy. And we see that people who would spend all the time in their own emotions or in their own brain are crazy people. So a spiritual journey in that way makes you crazy too. That doesn't mean you're not on a journey. It doesn't mean you're not spiritual. It just means you're not balanced. We're in the physical world. God put us here to balance the soul and the physical, the two opposites, the two different poles. But we have to balance. And balancing things is a challenge. All the time. It's not you balance it once and it continues. It's a constant challenge. And maybe that's one reason why we have to get married, because we have to learn that life is a constant balance. You don't say, oh, I was good yesterday and therefore I can do what I want today. Or no, every day it's a new challenge, and every moment it's a new challenge. And maybe that's one of the things it teaches us, that physically it's like that and spiritually. You don't want to be balanced, that's why you don't want to be married?
No.
Balancing the neighborhood.
Balancing the neighborhood.
That's enough.
Yeah.
What was going on with some tried to stop him from completing his spiritual or?
Oh, so in Midrashim it does. It speaks about the Satan. It tells all different stories that all different things happened to him on the way to stop him from going on his journey. But they're very strange stories. So if you look at it as a physical journey and spiritual beings are stopping him, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely, if you want to tell stories, it's nice stories. But is that what the reality of that is? I don't know, because it's really strange. If you're saying the stories are a metaphor for his own internal struggle in the journey, okay, you could say that. With the one inclination, the other inclination, how he's going to do it. And so he had blockages within himself and he had to conquer that. I can understand that. But to start saying the Satan came and he made a river and Satan did this and Satan did that. It doesn't say it in the story, it doesn't allude to it, and there's no reason to say it. The only reason you have to make up stories is if you don't understand what the words are saying. And the common translation, it doesn't make sense, so they make up a lot of stories. And they say these stories happen this way. But if you understand it as an eternal journey, you don't need to make up any of those stories. So this is a very difficult issue and a big issue with reading things in Medrash and Talmud is who made them up and why did they make them up. Did they make it up because they believed that way? Did they make it up to tell people stories? Every community has folklore, and a lot of people think that you can't tell children things the way they are. You have to make a story. Now, the problem with making stories is people start believing the stories and don't know don't know the intention of it. The metaphors, they reflect things, and so you create a lot of problems. And I think that's part of what happened.
We're gonna try to bring us back into
Yeah, we'll get back.
into the what in fact what
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, the word v'nishtachave also, the word vav is added, and I saw what it means. What it's referring to is v'nishtachave. It's we'll have kleis hanefesh. It's a prayer. It's a type of prayer where your soul leaves the body. That's why you fall flat on the ground. You're not because you go flat on the ground, because you're not there. There are people in prayer that leave, but that's not common in prayer. But there are people who do that also. The idea of prayer in Hebrew actually bonding with the Creator, and so that's what's supposed to be. And that's why you find your Rebbe's Chassidim who used to just fall flat on the ground in the middle of prayer. The soul left them at those times. There are a lot of interesting stories in that regard, but it's a journey. Unless you experience it, it's hard to understand it. When you see someone doing it, you don't understand it either. You see people are very spiritual and you think, oh, they're different, they're special. They're not. They're people like we are, but they're just open to something that you're blocked to. And they're listening to their senses, they're listening to their intuition. They don't block it out. That's all. Aleichem, to you. We return to you, to the realm that we are leaving. So he said either we'll leave and we won't come back, or we'll come back to this realm. Abraham speaks about going to pray and connect and then return with Isaac. There's no hint of sacrifice here. Now, to you, which is Aleichem, can also mean our elevation will elevate you as well. By Abraham going on this journey, it will elevate Isaac and elevate the world that he lives in as well. Nashuva is numerically 363, which is the same numerical value as Hamashiach. Aleichem is the same letters as Michael. If you take the letters Aleichem here to you and just change them around, it's Michael, the angel Michael. Traditionally, Michael with Mashiach will come to us at the time of redemption. It says the angel Michael will come to us to tell us about it with Eliyahu, with Mashiach. And some explain the word Kai until here, which is numerically 25, also to allude to Hanukkah when people returned to Hashem, when the Jews, the Maccabees, were able to do something which is not physically normal, but they brought all the people back to Hashem. Vayikach Avraham Esat Sayela, and Avraham took the wood for the elevation. Vayosem Yitzchak B'nai, put it on Yitzchak his son. Okay, this is actually a next piece, and Avraham took the advice. So not the wood, but the advice and the idea, the pathways of elevation, and he attributed them to, or transferred them to Isaac his son. In other words, one of the things, the main thing that Abraham was trying to figure out was this journey that we're going on. Is this for me? And therefore I'm going to go and not come back? Is this for Isaac? What's the real purpose here? And this took him time to figure out, to analyze, because a spiritual journey is not easy. Everyone is affected by it. So what's the purpose of it? Who's it for? So the journey here had to be with Avraham's comprehension. Lech lecha, go according to your comprehension. Abraham thought the main reason of the journey was for Isaac. Isaac thought the main reason was for Abraham. And this explains the conversation they had and the meaning of that they went together. Abraham moved with love and Isaac with awe. The two opposite emotions joined together as one with the source of life. When you connect, in order to connect, you have to get beyond your own limitations, your own issues. You are kindness. But sometimes you have to be the opposite. You are strength, severity. Sometimes you have to be the opposite. And they are both able to get beyond their personal nature and join together and go on this journey together. Because there has to be a total bonding. And to be a total bonding, you can't be stuck in your nature, in where you think, where you are. Now, to illustrate the point, there's a story of Rabbi Akeida5, famous rabbi who lived from 1761 to 1837. He was appointed rabbi in Prague. He was appointed rabbi in the city of Posen. And the custom was that when you bring a dignitary into a town, someone's coming in, you bring him in a chariot. They had a horse and a wagon. They brought a chariot, showing it's important. And people would line the streets and welcome him. As the chariot was being brought into the city, his son-in-law, who was later known as the Chassam Sofer, climbed out of the chariot and joined the people. He wanted to be not in the chariot, but he wanted to be part of the people that give honor to his father-in-law. After a short while, he looked at the other side of the wagon and saw his father-in-law was also walking at the side of the empty wagon. Because Rabbi Akeida5 thought, that, what's all this? He wasn't used to it. He said, what's all this? It must be because my son-in-law is such a great rabbi, they're honoring him. So he got out to walk next to the wagon. So everyone was honoring an empty wagon. So this is the idea where each one thought it was for the other one. The same thing, the discussion with Abraham and Isaac, Abraham had to figure out what it was for, and he finally decided this journey is for Isaac. He's coming together, and Isaac thought it was for his father. Yes?
Could it be not for Abraham or for Isaac, but for the whole Jewish people?
Yes, what they achieved later on.
I may be wrong with this, but wasn't the spot where they went to make the quote-unquote sacrifice or to pray or whatever it was, wasn't that the site, the holy site that became the site of the temple?
Well, later on we will discuss, next week, week after, we'll discuss about that part of it and that aspect. But yes, it was about future generations as well. Whatever you do affects future generations. So at this point they may not have understood that, but it does come out later on. Absolutely. That's correct. Okay, so I think we'll stop here.
Also the creation of the
Really
world.
enjoyed this. Yeah.
Also the creation